Good morning and welcome to all here at St. Benedict's, especially all guests. It's a blessing. All of us now are here together for offering of this Mass on this Sunday morning. I have some good news to share with you. The first is that Father Paul Eishoff, for our guests, he's the founding pastor of our parish, continues to recover from the serious injuries he received in an automobile accident last month. He's at St. Francis Hospital. He's been moved to the rehab area of the hospital. He's in room 4201, and he is taking visitors. Your cards and letters are greatly appreciated. He is doing physical therapy 3 hours a day. And so if you get there maybe late in the afternoon, he might be a bit wiped out by that time. But your prayers our prayers on his behalf are greatly appreciated. The other good news, having good authority, that we will be having donuts after this Mass. So balance has been restored to the force. So we're all very happy because we begin our religious education meetings on Wednesday night as well as now on Sunday morning right after this Mass. Please know that we have the silent auction in the Commons to benefit the Acts retreats, as well as an art sale to benefit the youth pilgrimage to Lourdes. And we also have a second collection today within our parish about youth mission trips and pilgrimages. Also, some special events this week here in our parish. Tomorrow night, the men of St. Benedict's, all the men in the parish are invited to the monthly meeting at 7 o'clock. The guest speaker, there's also a meal, and the guest speaker will be Father Sean O'Brien, a member of our own parish, is now the associate pastor at St. Anne's. And we're beginning this week a monthly speaker series known as Theology Uncorked. We'll be bringing in once a month someone to speak on issues of theology and prayer and spirituality. And before that, we have some sampling of some wine. The wine sampling begins at 6:30 in the parish hall. The guest speaker is, again, Father Sean O'Brien. And so we're able to get him not once but twice this week. And his topic will be Life is Awesome, Theology, Celebration, and Bioethics. Child care will be provided. And so all are welcomed including guests from elsewhere this Thursday evening. And also, next Sunday, something else that's new, we want to welcome new parishioners to a newcomer's brunch over at the parish rectory, which is on the other side of the parking lot. It's the house is right as you go out the parking lot on can't remember which street I live on. Okay, on Beach Street, and you make a right. The house is right there. But we'll be contacting new parishioners here in the coming days. If you don't get contacted, don't worry. The house is only so big, and so many will have everybody all at once. We want to spread these out monthly or quarterly. But again, they'll be after this Mass next Sunday. My favorite scene in the movie Sound of Music, which came out in 1965 with Julie Andrews in the lead role. I'm afraid my favorite scene in that movie has nothing to do with music, ironically. It has nothing to do with the songs or the lyrics. The Hills Are Alive, A Problem Like Maria, Climb Every Mountain, or even Edelweiss. My favorite scene has no music in it. It's when Captain Von Trapp tears down the Nazi flag and shreds it right down the middle. Man of action, right there. So that's my favorite scene in that whole movie. Now, although it's not emphasized in the film, the real Captain Von Trapp was a Catholic layman whose character and his actions, including opposition to the Nazis, were grounded in his faith in Jesus Christ. In the movie, the story, if you remember, takes place in 1938, right on the eve of the Second World War, as Nazi Germany is taking control of its neighboring country of Austria, where the Trapp family lives. Now, keep in mind, the Nazis did not invade Austria. They didn't roll in with their tanks and so on. The people of Austria voted in a general election overwhelmingly to become part of Nazi Germany. Overwhelmingly is in like 90% of the electorate voted yes, to freely become part of the Nazi regime. Now, Von Trapp recognized what most did not at the time, that the Nazi movement was intrinsically evil, meaning evil in and of itself. There could be no compromise, no go along to get along attitude, no keeping your head down and your mouth shut until it all blows over, even if it meant going against the desires and the expectations of others. Another like-minded Austrian was Franz Jägerstätter. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Now, he was not wealthy or well-connected the way that von Trapp was. He was a farmer in a small village. Yet Franz also was a committed Catholic layman who recognized the evil of the Nazis. He also came to realize and to accept that being a disciple of Jesus would require challenges. It would call for sacrifice, even if it went against the expectations of friends and neighbors, as well as the desires of the ones you love the most. Now, without going into his full biography, you're welcome to look that up on the internet at your convenience. In his youth, there was little to suggest that Franz would be a candidate to be a faithful disciple. See, by his mid-20s, he had a well-deserved reputation of spending much of his free time getting drunk and getting into fights. His conversion was apparently sparked by his marriage in 1936 to Francesca Schwanzenwenger. I think that's how you pronounce the last name. Next time I tell a story about somebody, I'll try to make somebody Smith or Jones or Brown or somebody like that, names for me, easy for me to pronounce. Now, they married in 1936, and they then went, as newlyweds, on pilgrimage to Rome to receive a papal blessing. And when Franz returned, he was a changed man. The drinking and the fighting were replaced with the Bible and the rosary, which he was often seen in the middle of his field when he take a break from his farming responsibilities of praying the rosary, reading the scriptures. To his friends that had known him before he got married, a lot of them thought, my goodness, he's turned into a religious fanatic. He became the sacristan in the village church. He took part in daily mass. He helped care for the poor in the village. He worked his farm and eventually became the father of 3 daughters. Then came the Nazis. In the election of 1938 that I spoke of, guess how many people in Franz's village voted against unification with Germany? 1. Guess who it was? Franz. He cast the only no vote of the electorate in his small village. And the response of his friends and his neighbors was not to respect him for his courage, but denounce him as a traitor. Then came World War II. Drafted into the Nazi army, Franz reluctantly went through basic training, but refused to swear an oath of loyalty to Adolf Hitler. He was given an exemption, was allowed to go home. A couple years later, he is drafted a second time without the possibility of an exemption for military service. It was a moment of decision, a challenge of discipleship that required commitment and sacrifice. This time, the Nazis were not going to take no for an answer. Refusing to serve in the war was an act of treason, punishable by death. For this reason, Franz's wife, mother, parish priest, and his bishop all urged him to serve in the army as a non-combatant. To say, Franz, you don't have to pick up a gun. Be a medic. You don't have to drop bombs on anybody. Work at the supply depot loading trucks or something like that. They saw it as the lesser of 2 evils because the alternative was to be convicted as a traitor, executed, and leaving his family disgraced and destitute. The problem of such thinking is that by choosing the lesser of 2 evils, you're still choosing evil. For Franz, there could be no compromise. No compromise with evil. There could be no go along to get along, even if it meant going against the desires of those he loved the most. Citing his Catholic faith, he refused to serve, even as a non-combatant, was convicted and executed for treason in 1943 at the age of 36. Today he is recognized as a martyr for the faith. Beatified in the year 2007, he is honored in his native place as a saint, just as with Blessed Stanley Rother is honored here in our place. In his last letter to his wife Francesca, Franz wrote, how painful life often is when one lives as a halfway Christian. It is more like vegetating than living. Blessed Franz, I believe, help us to understand today's lesson in discipleship that Jesus gives in this passage from Luke's Gospel. That we've been hearing these lessons of discipleship all throughout the summer, from one Sunday Mass to the next. And on the surface, Jesus appears to say that you cannot be a disciple without hating the ones you're supposed to love the most. Well, not so fast. And reflected in this passage in Luke's Gospel, Bishop Daniel Muggenberg, who's a priest of our diocese, who is currently an auxiliary bishop in Seattle, he looks at how Jesus uses the word hate. And he points out that Jesus is not talking about that emotional feeling that we might have towards someone or something, but rather Jesus refers to actions that others interpret as being hateful. Do you understand the distinction? It's not about the emotion that I hate this person or I hate that. Rather, I'm doing something which others look upon me with hatred. And there are times in which we need to do things that others don't like. For those of you who are parents, my guess is those times have often touched upon homework, curfew, and bedtime. But there are other things, more serious moments, when our actions go against the desires and expectations of others. There are times, as Bishop Muggenberg points out, when loving God and loving our neighbor require that we act in ways that our neighbors do not want. And their response is that they can accuse us of hating them. That was the response of Franz's neighbors when he voted against unification. You voted against it? You must hate Austria. You voted against it? You must hate your ethnic origins and your heritage. When he was in prison, awaiting trial and execution, I wonder if he ever heard, either implied or directly from his wife and mother, "How could you do this to us?" To be a disciple will require at times to go against the desires of others, even those that are closest to us. To use an example closer to home, look what often happens today. We have different opinions about politics. We have different opinions about cultural issues. And how often do we hear the response, "Well, that's just because you're full of hate." And I hear that on both sides of the political divide. Instead of thinking, well, we have different opinions because you might have different experiences, you have different core values which those opinions are rooted in. No, the response is to accuse somebody of hating. You must hate this country. You must hate this group of people. Instead of seeing that, especially for us as disciples, that our values are to be grounded in our Catholic faith and our relationship with Jesus Christ. And that will mean that our values can differ from those of others, including some of our neighbors, including members of our own families. And their response may be to accuse us of hating them. Today, Jesus' lesson to discipleship is that we cannot be disciples of convenience. We cannot be, as Franz put it, halfway Christians. Because there will be moments of decision, commitment, and sacrifice. There will be moments of being accused of hatred. Those who are not prepared will not be able to truly accept the invitation to take up the cross and follow Jesus. To do so will at times mean putting the Lord first, even above those that we love the most. Jesus says this not to discourage us, but rather to prepare us for the possible sacrifices that will be required of us. And those sacrifices, they're going to differ from each one of us. The kind of sacrifice that you're called to make may not be necessarily the sacrifices that I'm called to make, but we're all will be called to that moment of decision and commitment as disciples. And when they occur, may we, the intercession of Blessed Franz Jägerstätter, be not only prepared for them, but to welcome them as faithful disciples.